Hey gang, this is Pure Presence Live with me, Amy Torres, and Bill Free. Hey Bill.
Hey, namaste, my friend. Namaste, my friends.
Feels great to be here with you guys, and
Yeah,
we've had a few technical bumps, but today we seem to have gotten back in a groove. And
yeah,
our subject for today is something really interesting from A Course in Miracles. I never really hear anybody talk about it, but I've been mesmerized by it for many years. And it's the term self-fullness. Self-fullness. You find it in chapter 7, which is called The Gifts of the Kingdom. And it's in section 9, The Extension of the Kingdom. And Bill and I have been talking about the gifts of the kingdom, the treasure chest of tools and um, elevated ideas that A Course in Miracles gives us that are really the same as non-duality and Advaita Vedanta, but in different terminology and very often in Christian terminology. So, in non-dualism, we talk about emptiness and space and spaciousness. And this term, self-fullness, is the same thing, but we're coming at it from a different angle. And sometimes that really creates an opening for all of us. So we're going to get into it. In this one section, section 9, this word self-fullness is mentioned 4 times. And Jesus also mentions awareness and being in this same section. So
yeah.
I'm pretty
Pretty good
excited to
stuff.
get it. Yeah.
This section, it's actually called the extension of the kingdom.
Yeah, the chapter 7 is the gifts of the kingdom. And
Okay,
and section 9 within that chapter is the extension of the kingdom, as you said.
right, right.
Yeah.
And the thing I'm glad you called attention to this, Amy, because this feels like it has a rich, almost like a subtle message of itself in here, like the message that Jesus used 2,000 years ago that said, he or she who has ears to hear, let him hear. And this feels like it has a message like that, like one of those riddle messages built within it.
Mm,
Yeah,
a Zen
really.
cone.
Yeah, a Zen
Christian
cone.
cone.
Yeah. It's so good, and it's interesting. He starts off on this topic that you're talking about our creative power, and somehow when we restrict or we limit the self fullness that he's describing here, we affect the understanding or the experience of our creative power, even though it's never ending, it never stops, it's always occurring. There's a lot of like,
Exactly. I'm just interrupting you because a few people are asking for a test. So I'm concerned that they don't have video or guys, do you have sound? We just want to make sure that yes, we're live.
we're
We
live. Yes.
we
No video
we
at the
are
moment.
live.
Ray test. Okay. Yep. We are live.
Okay.
Um,
They're saying test.
can you guys, see and hear us? Okay.
Yes. Okay, let's see. David
David said
says
yes.
yes.
Good.
Hi, Ardith.
Okay. David has sound. All right.
Okay, Ray, Nancy, Lindsay, are you okay now? Hey, Nancy.
Oh, great.
Okay, Ray says he's receiving. Hi, Brad.
Good.
Okay,
Good.
Anita, thank you. Thanks for the feedback. Okay, yeah, Lindsay, why don't you maybe come out and come back in? Because it seems like we are transmitting okay.
Okay, good.
Oh,
Yeah.
David's playing it in ASM Gather. Thank you. Thanks for telling
Oh,
us.
cool.
Okay.
Thank you, David.
Yeah.
All right. Namaste, my friends.
Oh, and you know
Welcome.
what, guys? Maybe we should Om.
Oh, that's a good idea. Yeah. You know what I love about doing this show with you, Amy?
What?
You're just wide open. You're wide open, spontaneous, available, and connected to the presence.
Oh, Thank you, Bill. I feel like together we're really making this very strong antenna, and both of
Yeah.
us are totally willing to roll. We
Yes.
don't get hung
Yeah.
up on being too perfect or professional
Yeah.
because
Yeah.
stuff happens. So
Yeah. Yeah. Like last week, I couldn't get David Hoffmeister. I couldn't get him to come on. He did end up on the phone, and sometimes the electronics sort of they take over. But let's do
yeah,
have an ohm. Let's
Lois wants a gnome, and Ardith. I don't know why you can't see or hear. Let me just write Ardith. Um, Go out and come back in.
yeah. Yeah, usually Ardith can get in. Ardith is
Yeah.
usually right here.
Lindsay too. I don't know if you have any tech notes that you can type
Oh,
in the chat.
Ardith is in. It looks like Ardith might be in. You're there. Yay. Okay,
Okay,
good.
great. And
Good.
then Lindsay, the other one. Okay.
Good. Okay, so we're going to ohm. And you guys, my experience with ohming is that it brings me right into the present. It brings me right into the presence of what we all are. And that's what's going on for me.
And you know what? People have started to ask me, and I should do a dedicated video, but let me just share with you before we ohm so that you can try this too. That, ohm is spelled different ways. You can see it spelled O-M. You can also see it spelled A-U-M. And my yoga teacher, Dharma Mitra, many, many years ago, before anybody even heard of yoga, in New York City, there was just 2 yoga studios, his studio and Integral Yoga, which I had not heard of. So I'm in there with Dharma Mitra. I don't know anything. And he teaches us to ohm in this way. You kind of start down lower, around the diaphragm area, above the belly button, like a singer would. So you begin there with an ah, and then you allow the sound to move up through you. So it becomes a kind of oh in the back of your throat or your mouth. So it's kind of from down low, ah, and it's reverberating through my head as if I'm a cave. He didn't say that, but that's coming through me now. And it does feel cave-like. And then you conclude with the So you literally press your lips together with the M, the and you'll feel the vibration. Even if you're somebody who never feels energy, you cannot help but feel the vibration. You don't have to squeeze your lips too tight. It's not just engage your lips together. And so as this starts to become a flow, and it's not this disjointed A-U-M, but it begins to come together, you feel yourself being ohmed. And that's what Bill is talking about, so that we're connecting with the primordial sound, the vibration of the universe, what the scientists call the Big Bang. Maybe you could say it's the start of the sunship, but we're undoing. So we're working our way backwards through an ohm to the awareness.
Nice. I like that explanation, Amy. Thank you for that. And I also feel, it's my experience, that it just quiets the mind. The mind takes subservience of like submission to the ohm experience.
Yeah, the mind has to get wiped out as we merge back into the all that is.
Yeah.
So guys, be willing to get it totally wrong. My yoga teacher used to make the funniest sounds when he first started ohming, with no explanation, by the way. It took a while before he ever explained what he was doing. I just sat there like trying not to giggle, just like a little kid in auditorium. It was just, he'd do things like, oh, me, it's just really hilarious because at the end of your breath, he would go all the way. And we would just sit there because he had such big lungs and capacity, and he'd just be like, while the rest of us would just sort of trying to get a breath for the next ohm. So feel free to be silly and playful, and let's ohm.
Yep, let's do it.
Okay.
Oh. Namaste.
Namaste. After a good Om, I feel like that's it, show over.
Yeah,
We're there, we're here.
yeah.
Uh,
We so it does wipe out time, space. It wipes out the mind, and it brings the experience into presence.
so I hope you feel it. And you may have noticed I sort of divided it into equal parts, the AUM, but
Mm,
let it take you over. And there's plenty we can talk about the breath, about the inhale, the exhale. Um, but that's for another time because today is
yeah,
self fullness.
yeah. That is beautiful. And just for you guys that are listening on Gather, just to say that one of the cool things, if you haven't been to Sahaja, and Amy and I, as most of you know, we've been there several times, and one of the beautiful experiences of Sahaja is the sacredness, the sacred kind of the experience of this practice of oming and this practice of just being devoted to the sacredness, not in being intentional in your movement of quiet presence. And it's the experience that's sort of the culture of Sahaja. Would you say that, Amy?
Yeah, because it seems for whatever reason that Muji, who is Jamaican and then, spent a great deal of his upbringing as a teenager in London, but he's completely embraced India. And so they're chanting, and they're doing kirtan, and he uses all the Sanskrit language about conditioning. He'll say vasana, and, Muji always starts with Om Namaste.
Yeah.
Welcome to satsang.
Right. Yes. Yeah.
Muji, just answering Lois, his home is in Portugal, in the hills of Portugal, in a very kind of remote area. And he has built an ashram. An ashram has sprung up around him. People have come, and Bill was in that first wave when there was hardly anybody sitting under just a bit of a ruin with no real roof. Bill was there starting to build Monte Sahaja from scratch when Muji has a beautiful story. You can look it up on YouTube of how a friend of his kept urging him to look at this property and he just was not interested. And when he finally went, that was it. He just knew, I'm moving here. So it's really amazing that he's in Europe. You don't have to go to India. And yet, to enter his ashram is to have a very India type experience.
Yeah. Yeah, it's beautiful. And the other part that I love about Sahaja and also Muji is he embraces he embraces the teachings of Buddha, of Jesus, of he doesn't know, he's not familiar with the Course, but when he hears about Course ideas like Rupert, he gets it. He immediately sees the truth of it, and then
I would actually put it the opposite, that Muji, in my experience, is speaking the Course. He will literally say phrases from the Course. I always kick myself that I don't remember or write down exactly what he said, because it's
yeah,
not just something as generic as we are the light. It's more specific than that.
yeah,
And yet, he hasn't read the Course. But, Muji, when he did that interview with me, he pushed back against the Course a little bit.
yep,
And so he doesn't understand the Course. He knows the truth, and so he expresses it in very similar ways to the Course
yeah.
very often.
Yeah, I agree. I agree that he did push it back. And actually, that was the first reference that I noticed of the built in duality that's in the workbook lessons. Is Muji's from the interview that you had with Muji, and he identified that, oh, there's duality in that statement right there.
Yeah, but I feel that both Muji and Rupert, perhaps, because they have not read the Course, do not appreciate that Jesus is talking to the mind. He's not talking to the person. But because
Exactly.
he needs to meet you where you're at, it seems to us when we first enter the teaching that we're being spoken to personally. But we feel that way with Muji and Rupert too. It
Right.
takes a while to realize, oh, Muji's really not talking to me, Amy, or to you, Bill. Not
Right.
really.
And neither is Jesus, really.
Jesus is definitely not. But
Yeah.
if we're at the point of development, a place on the path that's less mature, then we may have to have a very human experience with Jesus and look at his picture, which I had to do for a long time to feel like there's an embodied something there for me to relate to as a body. But
Yeah.
little by little that goes away. So I'm dying to get into the self-fullness though.
Okay, you want to open it up? I started talking about the first paragraph, but why don't you? This was your intuitive, and why don't you just open it up for us, Amy?
Okay, Bill, but I want you to come back with what you were saying because we got a little distracted by the tech stuff, and I wanted to hear it. I wasn't listening as well as I wanted to.
That's cool. That's great.
Okay, so I'm going to read, guys. Let's just read a little from the course. The extension of the kingdom begins with, only you can limit your creative power, but God wills to release it. God no more wills you to deprive yourself of your creations than he wills to deprive himself of his. Do not withhold your gifts to the sonship, or you withhold yourself from God. Selfishness is of the ego, but self-fullness is of spirit, because that is how God created it. So the first thing I want to do is just try and simplify this, because sometimes it seems so complicated. When Jesus says only you can limit your creative power, but God wills to release your creative power or release you from the limitations that you're imposing on yourself, it just means that we are seeing ourselves as a body, which is a kind of prison, and we're accepting that as a fact. So we have severely limited our knowing of what we really are. And what we really are is God's creation. And then we have created our own creations. And once created, all creations are one. They're the same. So it sounds like there's many different creations, but actually, if you use the metaphor of light, let's say God is the first light, and light streams more light, and we are that light. And by virtue of being light, we must extend more light. And those are our creations, which is just light, but it's all the same light. There's no separate light.
So, and this is a clue in my mind. This is where he gives a description of our creative power that can be limited or can be withheld or seemingly withheld. It's not withheld from God. He says, do not withhold your gifts to the sonship. So he's giving us a clue that it's almost like a clue that says, don't do this and this will happen. Do this so this occurs. And this is one of those like clues on the beginning of these instructions that are that's telling us when we follow these instructions, guess what? We're going to release what's always there. We're going to release this creative power. So pay attention. That's what it's telling me. I love this section that you brought up, Amy, because when I got to the end of it, I went, oh my God, look at this. This is an instruction to release the creative power of God.
Yeah, it's beautiful. And you guys, when I read from the course, often I'll substitute a word. What I mean is, if it says it, and I know that it's referring to God, I'll say God. Because when I read the course and it just goes, it, I lose the thread. So sometimes I fill in a blank for us by just placing that word in there. And I'm glad you're talking about this, Bill, because I got a little confused when I read release it. Let me just see. Only you can limit your creative power, but God wills to release it. So God wills to release your creative power. But I have to fill
Yes.
in the it in order to get that thought really clear in my mind.
Yes. Yes. And the other part of it, Jesus doesn't make mistakes in this course, and he wouldn't tell us that, he wouldn't give us a description of selfishness right behind self-fullness if it didn't have some kind of connection to self-fullness. So he's inviting us to not be selfish. He's inviting us to be free and to be self-fullness, but not with things, not with objects in time and space. Be free, just like we express that free spirit, the spontaneity of oming. That is expressing the presence of God in all the sonship which we serve in the mind of God, where all of our creations, if you read on, Jesus speaks to us and says that all of our creations are connected with each other in the sonship.
Yeah, we can never not be connected. Hopefully that light image helps you with that. But I'm grinning because, the course came through psychologists, and I think it was Freud who talked about wish fulfillment and self-fulfilling prophecies. And a self-fulfilling prophecy is usually seen as a negative thing, like, we're going to set ourselves up and then something bad will happen, maybe like the Oedipal complex or something like that. So I'm laughing because in this scenario, a self-fullness is the best self-fulfilling prophecy, that we rediscover that we are full of the God self and that that's all there ever has been.
Yeah. Yeah. It's beautiful.
Then
And go ahead, Amy.
then it says, the Holy Spirit is in the part of the mind that lies between the ego and the spirit, mediating between them, always in favor of the spirit. Now, that's another way of talking about the decision-making part of the mind that gets to choose again. And all through the course, Jesus tells us to choose again. So in this case, he's saying choose, as Bill just said, choose against selfishness, which really doesn't give us anything, and choose for self-fullness. But, it's such a clear explanation. I don't feel that we get it that often in the course, that we're told the Holy Spirit is in the part of the mind that lies between the ego and spirit. That's where the Holy Spirit is. And the Holy Spirit mediates between the ego and spirit, always in favor of spirit. But he is your mediator.
Right. And he's not separate from you. He is you in that quiet place. That's why Jesus continually, from the very first workbook lessons all the way through to the end, he invites us to go into that quiet place so that we can have the experience of abiding as the Holy Spirit, as the mediation between the two, and experiencing what the Spirit wants us to experience and being available to receive it.
And that might be, in non-dual terms, the aware of place, where Holy Spirit is aware of our belief in objects and matter and physicality, but Holy Spirit doesn't buy into that. So as we rest in the stillness that you talk about all the time, Bill, because you're an embodiment of that stillness. I feel often that just your physicality can be very comforting and still. That as we rest in that stillness, we discover exactly what you just said, that we are the Holy Spirit. We are all equal manifestations of the Holy Spirit. Jesus was a man who was a manifestation of the Holy Spirit. You can find that, I believe, in the glossary of terms.
Yeah.
And you and I and Bill, we are all manifestations of the Holy Spirit. So when we're willing to let go of the very strong belief that we are the body and that this identity is reality, and just let go of that a little bit, then we discover this aware of This is the huge opening. This is why Bill and I are so enamored with Muji and Rupert, because they made that so clear that that's the natural intelligence that is observing everything. And for me, I find that aware of state pretty easy to get and to explain to you. And then to let go all the way into awareness, the Course says God does that for us, actually, that God takes it from there if we take the first two steps. So,
yeah. Well, it's our little willingness to pause. It's our little willingness to, there's language in the Course where Jesus invites us to recognize when we are making excuses to keep from being focused on the truth. We're making up excuses. He says, when you're finished with your excuses, come back to that. But if your excuses are a little bit taking over, if you're preoccupied with your things that you think you need to do, go take care of those. And then when you're ready to be dedicated to the truth, come back to the lesson.
Yeah. And every path, I think we find that we're oscillating, that we come in more closely and then we move back. That's why I love labyrinths, because labyrinths make that a spiritual practice, that you come in close to the center, but then you're pushed back out to the edge and then you come back in. And I think that's all we can stand for a while. We get close and then we have to back away.
Yeah. That's kind of like life too, though, isn't it, Amy? Because it's almost like for a while on the spiritual path, you are very dedicated. You're very, I'm doing the work. And then something comes your way that you're not expecting, or that is just catches you what seemingly is off guard, and it's almost like you make a couple steps back, but really you're not. You're just something that you weren't aware of needs to call to your attention, that there's some residue somewhere, there's something that's blocking the light, and all that's occurring is that's being recognized, resolved, and you'll be back, coming back into the light, back into the awareness of love's presence.
Yeah. So I think it might be time for our break, Bill. Check me on that. And then if it is, when we come back, we're going to hit 3 other points on self-fullness before we do a Q&A.
Okay, so let me see I do have the break. I'm going to load it, and you guys will be right back in about 45 seconds. Here's a little commercial break for Unity Online Radio. This program is brought to you by the Teachers of God Foundation and Amy Torres, ACIM.com. Both of these organizations have programs to support you in the transformation and awakening experience. The Teachers of God Foundation has the 40-day program that is free, the Guide to 365, ACIM 365, and Living in Purpose 6-month mastery course. Amy Torres has her well-known Working the Workbook course, her new Intuitive course, and she does private sessions by appointment. Thank you for joining with us today on this webinar. And now back to Bill and Amy. Hi, everyone. We're back.
Before he wiggles away, I want to show you my little Aussie.
Oh, is that Smudges?
It's Aussie.
Oh, that's Aussie?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Cool.
But you can see he's wiggly. He's ready to go.
Well, okay. He lets you hold him pretty good. Pick him up, no problem.
Yeah, he's a snuggly cat, but he's got a mind of his own. He's a cat.
Yeah. Who was it that said let's see, I think it was Eckhart Tolle that says that every Zen master needs a good guru, and that the Zen master's guru is his cat. So all Zen masters need a cat around to keep them sharp.
Oh, that is so cool.
I know. I know, and it's true because cats are, I don't know if they actually can they hear you or they only hear vibration because I don't, I call them like dogs, but they don't come like dogs.
Oh, they definitely hear us. I mean, we coo to the cats and they're just rolling over and showing their tummies and they totally respond. They love Scott's voice. Scott
Oh,
he's just an animal lover. They hear us for sure.
yeah. I just don't know. They can't really hear words though, right? They hear vibration.
I don't know if they discern words, but sometimes it seems like Smudges is responding to his name for sure.
Okay.
You never
But
know though. Like you say, it
yeah.
may not be the word Smudges. It can just be the lilt and the tone and the vibration of it.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because if in a sound wave, you probably have the same sound wave every time you call his name.
Yeah.
And that might be I just have a hunch. I've just been thinking about that for with my cats because I've never been a cat owner until this year. And I love the cats. I love them. And I think they're very much operating in a non-dual environment.
We're going to have to be bringing the cats in more often. So, maybe you can grab one of your little kitties when it comes walking through and I'll get Smudges in here and yeah.
That sounds good. Well, before the break, that break was not a Unity commercial. It was sort of a commercial break for the Teachers of God Foundation and Amy Torres, which are the sponsors of this show. And we just give a plug for that. And at the same time, we actually need that break so that we can upload this to Unity Online Radio so it can be played on Fridays at 3 p.m. Eastern Time. So
Yeah,
for you guys that
this
want to hear this show again, or you want to pass it on to a friend, you can pass it on at 3 p.m. Eastern or on Fridays at 3 p.m. or 12 Pacific time.
Yeah, and on Fridays, if you listen through Unity Radio, it's audio only. So this is the live webinar is now doubling. It's a live webinar and it's also the Unity Radio show. And we incur expenses to do this show and to take care of tech issues. And, there's a lot behind the scenes that goes on, even though it may look like we just boop showed up live, la-di-da, but there's more to it than that.
Yeah, and actually what happened was I decided that our show was taking up too much space on the webinar jam for programming and for the people that run the Teachers of God Foundation. So I decided to open my own webinar jam room. And that's why the re-registration was necessary for this time, because I've moved it over to a private room that's operated by billfree.com.
Thanks, Bill. That's great
Yeah.
that you do that. This
Yeah.
wouldn't happen without you.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, it wouldn't happen without you either, Amy. Thank you for being a co-host and such an awesome, you just make this so easy to do.
Yeah, we got a good flow going.
Yeah.
So guys, we want you to be able to ask questions. And I also want to just touch on a few more self-fullness references here. It's really fascinating because in paragraph 2, it begins, Spirit knows that the awareness of all its brothers is included in its own as it is included in God. The power of the whole sonship and of its creator is therefore Spirit's own fullness, rendering its creations equally whole and equal in perfection. And then a little lower down, it says, creating is the opposite of loss, as blessing is the opposite of sacrifice. Oh, I'm sorry, guys. I skipped a sentence that's really important. It says, everything God created is given all his power because it is part of him and shares his being with him. So in this one paragraph, we've touched on awareness and being. And then it says, creating is the opposite of loss, as blessing is the opposite of sacrifice. Being must be extended. And it continues that way a little bit. It says the extension of God's being is Spirit's only function. Its fullness cannot be contained any more than can the fullness of its creator. fullness is extension. And I'm just going to jump down to paragraph 4, where it says, the kingdom is forever extending because it is in the mind of God. That's the capital M mind, God mind. You do not know your own joy because you do not know your own self fullness. So, Muji might say, you do not know your own joy because you think you're somebody. And when you find out you are nobody, then you will be empty. And it's the same thing, isn't it, Bill?
Yeah. It is completely the same thing. And, the mind wants us to believe or to think that we need to do something or learn a pose or have a mantra or have a watch the breath or go into the longer meditations are going to bring you closer to this experience. And what Jesus and the Course and Advaita and the Bhagavad Gita and all of the non-dual teachings, Rupert, Muji, they're all saying that we are this power. We are this experience. We don't need to look for it. We only need to be it.
Yeah.
We need to be it. And even
we are it right now. Didn't you all feel that pause that came right after you said that, Bill? There was just an opening.
Yep. Yes.
Now, I think that some people are experiencing buffering or losing. I think they're coming in and out, just so you're aware of that, Bill. I don't know that there's anything we can do, guys.
That's not on our end. It's most everyone has their own bandwidth, and it looks like, Amy's on the West Coast. She's got a good signal. I see a good picture. We have good sound quality. I'm on the East Coast. I have a good picture. I'm actually hardwired in. And if you're buffering and it's you want to see the whole show again, when you get the follow-up email from registering in an hour, just click on it and the buffering will probably load. It'll probably load the whole thing to your computer or your phone, and you can watch it without interruption.
Yeah. Thanks for telling them that. Yeah, it's good to know. Okay.
So coming back to this, I just want to encourage everyone to know that this place, this quiet place of awareness that we keep pointing to, this show was named for this experience of pure presence because it is a visceral experience of knowing what you are, what we are, what I am in God, in not God separate from me, in God, the light that I am, in the presence and the power of Creator that you are. And there is no separation in our connection with this light that is God, that is the Father. There is no separation from this experience of being. And this is what the Course points to. This is what Advaita points to. And we only need to pause and just notice that whatever is aware of our experience, what is that is aware of our experience, is what we are. And from this experience, from this understanding, we are in this power that's being spoken of here. We are in the power of creation right now, right here. And this power is intelligent, it is intuitive, it knows what to do, where to go, what to say to whom. This power of the Creator is given to all of us freely as what we are. And when we enter into it, we're now extending it just by acknowledging it. Just by this brief moment or minutes of acknowledging we are the presence of God. We are this I am that we've always been looking for, or we've had brief moments of a connection with. We're always this. And in this quiet place, in this place of pausing and acknowledging Creator, the light, the presence, the knowing, this is home. This is where everything comes to the truth.
Bill,
Sorry.
you're giving us a peace of God experience. I think we have.
Yeah, I was getting a phone call all of a sudden, you guys, and God is calling, and He's calling us into this experience. Did you feel that experience? It was such a palpable experience to share with each of you, and we have that access available all the time, 24/7. We have access to the living and breathing expression, even the way it's being described in the course to us as extension. So I just invite everyone here to come into this experience often. Come here often and have the experience that's being offered to us in the course. There's a beautiful workbook lesson. Let me see how much time.
Bill, let me just jump in. Let's use the self-fullness of today's show. Let's use that as where we're going to tie it together with the experience that you just guided everyone into spontaneously. Just because I promised folks that we get to the other two. And Good. They're right here in this section. They definitely speak to what you're talking about, just Good. In that particular way.
Good.
Yeah, just because we have limited time. If we start going into the workbook lessons, I know us, we won't make it back.
That's true. So thank you, Amy, for keeping it on this content that we're looking at. Yeah. It says that the kingdom is forever extending. And that's what we were just doing. When we go into that quiet place, the reason that I like to keep going into that quiet place, because it's such an experience of knowing in that space that, it's kind of like the mind gets, I don't know what happens to the mind, but the experience of experiencing God really reveals itself in such a big way.
Yeah. And I'm pretty sure that folks felt it. I certainly did when you took us through that. So I'm just going to touch on those 2 points and then we can do anything we like with them. It's just that it also says here that a split mind cannot perceive its fullness and needs the miracle of its wholeness to dawn upon it and heal it. I feel that that's what you spontaneously did when you just went. I don't even want to say there, Bill. You went here. You went into the heart of God.
Yeah.
And so you just dropped the split mind. And it's very magnetic. When you said it was palpable, yeah, I felt it. I'm sure we're not the only ones.
Yes.
And then it says that the miracle of wholeness reawakens the wholeness in the whole mind, I think. I think that's what it's saying. It's all these it's, and restores it to the kingdom because of its acceptance of wholeness. The full appreciation of the mind's self-fullness makes selfishness impossible and extension inevitable. That is why there is perfect peace in the kingdom. Spirit is fulfilling its function, and only complete fulfillment is peace. It's almost as if you were swept up in what this section is saying, Bill, and then just demonstrated it.
Yeah, that's what it felt like. It felt like it was just it carried me, the description just pulled me into it. And then I facilitated that entry point.
You did. Exactly.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's that easy too. It really does only need to be, and this is why I feel that the course is such a gift of bringing us back to the experience of love's presence. It's so filled with meditative practice of going within, of reaching in, and not with the mind, going in as presence, going in and self-realizing. And then the mind just sort of, it's like a cat, the cat, the mind just starts purring like a cat does, It just sort of purrs because the mind that thought it was separate comes into that self-realization too. And it goes, oh, this feels so good. You know what I mean?
Yeah, that it's not going to be annihilated.
Yeah.
Well, the last hit that I'm going to give you guys, and then maybe we'll have time for a question, is in paragraph 6, we're told, disobeying God's will is meaningful only to the insane. In truth, it is impossible to disobey God's will. Your self-fullness is as boundless as God's. Like his, it extends forever and in perfect peace. Its radiance is so intense that it creates imperfect joy, and only the whole can be born of its wholeness. Be confident that you have never lost your identity with a capital I as spirit, and the extensions which maintain it in wholeness and peace. Miracles are an expression of this confidence. And it goes on. But I just wanted you to have this term, this idea of self-fullness, as maybe something that clicks with you or makes sense and helps you into that entry point that Bill facilitated. Anything that we find inspiring and comforting enough to relax into, to trust, is the entryway for you to discover what is already here. And there's just countless terms and ideas and concepts that the Holy Spirit can use for your awakening process. And that's what we're doing here. That's why we're here.
Yeah. And the descriptions that are being offered in this section, they're not platitudes. They're not, they're not, something that we do later or that we reach when we're like more evolved. These experiences only need, in fact, I don't see, I think Jesus.
There's a couple of questions here I just want you to know.
Okay. Well, let me finish what I was pointing to, because where you talked about a split mind cannot perceive its fullness and needs the miracle of its wholeness to dawn upon it and heal it, it only requires a dawning on the split mind. It just requires just a little bit of willingness to just get quiet, and then you can ask yourself, your higher self, the Holy Spirit. You can say, show me this experience of this dawning on my mind. Show me the experience of this reawakening to the wholeness that I am, and give yourself the time to be with that, to just be still with the relationship, the connection that you have with the Holy Spirit, which, as we read from the beginning of this, the Holy Spirit stands in the middle as the facilitator, bringing us into the wholeness of the fullness of what we are.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. So I'm just inviting each of us to give the space in your morning time or in the evening before you go to bed, even if it's only 5 minutes. Give the space and ask the self to bring you into the dawning of your own wholeness. And then write to us and tell us how that worked, how that was for you. And I'd love to hear from you. And Amy, there were a couple of questions in the survey that we had that we were talking about that we want to come back to. So yeah. I would just like to speak to the ones who took the time to fill in the survey. And then there were a few questions that were up on the chat.
Yeah, so I think they're pretty quick. A couple of things. For those of you who have answered the survey, we may not get to your question in each show, but we may do a themed show around it. So we're going to do an interview with a fascinating physician, a medical doctor named Dr. Scott Kolbaba in a week or so. We'll email you about it, and we'll talk about physical illness and miracles from his point of view, which is not exactly A Course in Miracles, but I think will be really satisfying. And so just know, if we don't answer you individually, that we're very grateful in reading each and every question and looking for a way to incorporate it into a show. And the two questions here, Bill, one was, Ardith just said, please tell us about that beautiful lesson. So maybe you can let them know which lesson you were about to point to. And Brad asked, could we say that self-fullness is closer to being in the oneness of God, and it is not so much of an awareness, but rather an experience? And my quick answer to that is simply, just try what Jesus guides you into. Like, read that section for yourself and just have that little willingness to unfold and find out for yourself, because it doesn't really matter. It's more to have your experience and discover your awareness. That's what matters, rather than discerning, between exactly what we don't even really have words for it, what it means exactly.
Yeah, I would say that I would agree with that. And I would also say that there's no separation between the selffulness, or there's no difference between the selffulness or the oneness or the awareness. Awareness is where everything is seen. All experiences rise up like the clouds before the sky, or like the mist before the sun. All experiences rise up in front of awareness. So there's really no difference in any of those things that you mentioned, Brad. And the time that you spend just being present in that quiet place of being aware of experience, just being aware of experience, what the body is doing, what the person is doing, the thoughts are doing, the feelings, emotions. If you abide there, you are abiding in the fullness, in the self-fullness, and as the presence of God, as spirit, as light that you are. Great question, though. Thank you for asking the question. And I'm going to share the 2 workbook lessons that I'm going to invite everyone to, like, alternate these every other day. Workbook lesson 41 and workbook lesson 49. And you will find that Jesus and your experience of oneness, Jesus and the Holy Spirit, will guide you, facilitate you to the experience of God, to the experience of love's presence that you are. You will reach God, and you will notice a visceral experience of experiencing God. With workbook lesson 41 is God goes with me wherever I go. And workbook lesson 49 is God's voice speaks to me all through the day. And alternate these 2 workbook lessons and it'll blow your mind.
I also just want to throw in, it just occurred to me that I have a beautiful mindfulness, I don't know what to call it. I guess it's an MP3 that you guys could look for on CD Baby or iTunes. It's 99 cents, and it's God Goes With You. And you can listen to it while you're driving. You can listen to it while you're doing the dishes. It can enhance the practice that Bill just offered you about going back and forth between those 2 lessons, and maybe even, just having a voice in your head. I'm not reading the lesson. It's derived from the lesson, though.
Nice. Very nice. And just before we go, I just want to say, Brad, and also one more thing. If you just find yourself just being quiet and in present, just give your mind, give your heart, give your whole self to the Holy Spirit that you are a few minutes before you go to bed at night. And your sleeping, I think it might have been Henrik. Your sleeping dreams will be totally cared for by your higher self, by the self-fullness that you are, by the God experience that you are.
Also, and so guys, just sorry to interrupt you, Bill, but I don't mean to do shameless self-promotion, but my book, Sweet Dreams of Awakening, is for that very purpose. If you just read the briefest of blessings before you go to sleep, it helps to do exactly what Bill is saying. So that can be a nice complement or supplement to the course practice or whatever you're doing.
Good. I'm glad you mentioned that, Amy. I have a copy of it on my sideboard over here next to the bed. And
it's kind of like a children's book for grown-ups. It's really soothing. When I read it, I can't believe that it came through me. It's just a brief, beautiful thing.
Yeah. So it's time to go, you guys. Thank you all for joining us. We love you. We bless you. And we thank God for you. And we'll see you next week.
See you next week. Bye-bye.